Dog days of summer, but inflation remains cool. The blazing heat felt mostly by Federal Reserve Chairman Jay Powell. The Trump-Putin summit comes into focus. Anchorage, Alaska, face-to-face, taking temperatures. Ukraine on the outside talks hopefully of Trump's strength. Ask Grok or ChatGPT what artificial intelligence is doing to the job market for college grads, and the answer will be the same: hurting it. Hello everyone, I'm Major Garrett in Washington. I welcome you to the Takeout. Nothing to see here. That feels like the theme for several stories cascading across your news feeds today. Inflation still here, but lower than expected. The Trump-Putin summit for temperature taking and exploring options. Very low expectations. The presidential takeover of policing in the nation's capital. A few more cruisers, National Guard personnel moving about, but only for 30 days, and half of that might be taken up by simply getting organized. The Texas redistricting standoff continues. Lots of legal filings and rhetorical rinse and repeat, but little movement because Texas House Democrats remain out of state, paralyzing a power play in waiting. Now, much could come of all these stories. Today's inflation data contains faint hints of tariff trouble. Trump and Putin's meeting could lead to a ceasefire, land swaps, peacekeeping troops, and the redrawing of power in Europe. The D.C. police takeover could be a dress rehearsal for federalizing police in other cities, something the White House, given the opportunity, did not rule out today. And the Texas power struggle could lead to redrawn congressional maps in more than a half a dozen other states, intensifying a national mood of ends justifies the means politics. I promise, we'll get to all of this. And since we keep a watchful eye on pop culture here at the Takeout, there will be some Taylor Swift. I know you are relieved, but before that era of cultural Cool Whip, vegetables first. That means inflation numbers. And Jolene Kent, who joins us from Los Angeles. Jolene, break it all down for us, please.
Major, first of all, can I just say, if you need a reporter, a real journalist on Taylor Swift, I'm your gal. Happy to help you out with that later in the show. But look, inflation today came in basically steady. If you strip out those volatile energy and food prices, you see that core inflation went up 3.1% compared to a year ago. This inflation read does reflect the reality for so many people who are paying those weekly bills and those monthly bills. We saw increases when it comes to meat, poultry, and eggs. Those were up 5.2% compared to a year ago. Dining out, almost 4% more expensive. Medical care, more than 4% more expensive. Car insurance still up 5.3%. And so that core inflation number, that is the most important number for the Federal Reserve, for Chair Jay Powell and the entire FOMC as they go into this September meeting as to whether or not they will cut rates. We still expect a September rate cut at that mid-September meeting. But when you look at this picture, you know, inflation basically is kind of holding steady as people continue to pay more every month for those essential items. So nothing to be hair on fire about, but certainly something, you know, to continue to watch as the Fed weighs that important decision in September.
Speaking of the Fed and Chairman Jay Powell, the president again on social media talked about being too late, being unresponsive, not just the chairman, but the board itself, and giving voice to a potential lawsuit against Jay Powell over renovations at the Federal Reserve buildings. Jay Powell knows as well as anyone that lawsuits take forever. His term ends next May. That's not going to run him out of the office, but it just creates this intensified political heat beneath his feet.
Yeah, look, Major, this is nothing Chair Powell is new to. He's no rookie at this game, right? And so when you look at the picture, President Trump is threatening this lawsuit. He didn't say when he plans to file it or any sort of timeline. Like you said, this stuff takes forever to work its way through the system to any real action. And then if you also look at what President Trump said about rates, he says Jerome "too late" Powell must now lower the rate. Well, guess what? Can't do that until the mid-September meeting, which I believe is the 17th and 18th of September there in Washington where you are. So there's a lot of political hubbub right now around this. None of it is new, but what a lot of people are paying attention to is that the impact of tariffs is starting to be felt. And what a lot of these companies are saying to us that even though the data today doesn't say it's super dramatic price increases due to tariffs, these companies are saying, okay, how much longer can I pass off these higher prices to consumers or absorb it with, say, maybe some savings on hand? What happens when I run out and I can't hire, I can't make payroll, I have to let people go, and that broader sort of hit to the economy? I don't think we've seen that stuff bear out just yet, and the next few months are going to be pretty critical on that front. Major.
Pulling the curtain back for us on the what happens next part of the economic data. Jolene Kent, thank you very, very much.
Thanks,
Members
Major.
of the D.C. National Guard have started showing up on city streets here in Washington. The president deployed about 800 guardsmen. Trump also took over D.C. Police Department, doing so for 30 days. The latest on all this, Scott McFarland joins me now. Scott, there was a meeting today between the mayor of the District of Columbia and the Attorney General.
And the U.S. Attorney for D.C. and this new official who actually is the administrator of the Metropolitan Police of Washington, the DEA administrator, a man named Terry Cole. It's a lot of names involved with running a municipal local police department. You don't see a lot of differences right now. There's some federal agents manning posts throughout the District of Columbia. They're spread out pretty wide. You may see some of them with badges and firearms at night. The D.C. Guard, that's a much different look. The optics of that are different, Major. They likely will arrive on the street in the coming days. They've arrived at their armory to prepare for deployment, but all of this comes without an end game, or where this goes or where this ends.
And what are they being told they are most likely to do once deployed, the National Guard, Scott?
The National Guard have different rules, obviously, under which they operate. They're using a different type of authority here called Title 32. What does Title 32 mean? It means they have some law enforcement role. Most National Guard deployments are under Title 10, where they don't have a law enforcement role. Our CBS News reporting is that they're not likely to be brandishing firearms at their post, street side, or on sidewalks in neighborhoods. They may be part of the logistical support for police, helping them move things or move people to certain places, move equipment. But it's far from clear what that role is because we haven't seen this before. We don't know how this plays out. We talked to a number of folks who live in these communities and have lived there their whole lives. They like the extra law enforcement. Nobody's protesting having extra police to make things safer on streets, but they have some consternation about what this is or is not with the National Guard troops.
And is the National Guard subject to that 30-day limit that the takeover of the D.C. police is subject to?
The National Guard has the ability to be called up by the president unilaterally at any point. So the time limits
here for any duration.
For any duration. The law enforcement, the federalization of the municipal police department, that has a 30-day window on it. But some of this feels fungible because there's no guarantee it lasts the whole 30 days, nor is there a guarantee this isn't enacted again in the future. And we spoke to one longtime community activist in the Anacostia neighborhood of Washington, D.C., who said his concern is not extra police. His concern is if you take the police, do you give them back? And we want them back eventually.
The D.C. police back in the jurisdictional control of the mayor, the city council, and the police chief and all the rest.
That's right.
Scott McFarland, I appreciate it very much. Thank you, sir. A listening exercise. That is how the White House described Friday's planned summit in Anchorage, Alaska, between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Top diplomats for both countries, well, they spoke on the phone today. That was an important thing because they're trying to nail down that this meeting will actually happen. Ed O'Keefe joins us from the North Lawn of the White House. That's first things first. Make sure this thing actually happens.
And it looks like we're headed to a meeting on Friday in Alaska. The White House announcing today that the two leaders will indeed meet. Okay, we've got that. Who else is going to be in that meeting? What exactly are they going to discuss? What is the end goal of this? We asked the president this yesterday. We asked again today at the White House, and they're essentially saying this is a temperature-taking exercise. And it won't happen until the president speaks tomorrow with Volodymyr Zelensky and other European leaders in a virtual conversation to get their sense of what they would like the president to keep in mind, at least, when they have this conversation on Friday. But in essence, this thing could be very quick, Major. This thing could go on for a long time. We simply don't know what the format will be, to what extent these two will discuss things with their underlings, or whether it's just the two of them one-on-one.
Ed, sometimes we as reporters get inklings of perceived advantages before events like this. And it struck my attention, as I'm sure it did yours, that the Russian Foreign Ministry put out a readout of a phone call between the Foreign Minister and Secretary of State Rubio before our State Department did. And that may signal nothing at all, or it also may signal that the Russians want to make sure they're getting their version of events out first no matter how incrementally small that might be?
Well, see, I look at that slightly differently. It's that the Russians and every other country this administration talks to gets their version of events out faster than this one, because this one still can't quite grasp whether they should issue some kind of an official readout or they're waiting for the president to issue one himself through his Truth Social account. So there's been a real conflict over at the State Department about how often do we release readouts. Over here, there's been an issue with confirming that calls happened with certain world leaders. So I don't know that it's necessarily regarding this weekend and the advantage they have. I think it's just standard practice right now that any time an American official, a top American official, is talking to another country, that other country is more likely to get the word out before this White House or any of the departments do.
And very quickly, Ed, President Zelensky is trying to put the best face on it, talking about confidence and the strength the U.S. brings to this encounter.
Yeah, the more he can be engaged in this, certainly in the lead up, the better. And tomorrow will go a long way to either assuaging those concerns. The president can say to them, look, you all need to calm down. I realize there's bad blood here, but you have to trust me and my ability to go into this to feel him out and get a sense of how serious he may be. After that, whether they can make peace or not remains to be seen. But he has also vowed that the moment he leaves that meeting with Putin, he's calling Zelensky to let him know how it went. And from there, we'll see. Do they meet up again later this month? Do they meet in September? Do they meet at all? Or does the war rage on?
Ed O'Keefe at the North Lawn of the White House. Thank you so very much. You can catch full coverage of President Trump's Alaska meeting with Russian President Putin all day long right here on CBS News 24/7. That this coming Friday. We are following breaking news out of Texas. A train has derailed in Palo Pinto County. That's east of Dallas. Officials have said they may be dealing with potentially hazardous materials, but no word yet on what those hazardous materials might actually be. So far, there has been no word of an evacuation order or injuries. We will keep a close eye on this and bring you more information as it becomes available. Still to come, inconvenient facts. President Trump fired the last Bureau of Labor Statistics chief over downbeat jobs numbers. The new pick now suggests suspending monthly jobs reports altogether. Plus, artificial intelligence doesn't have to fill out a resume, but it's already squeezing college grads out of that first big post-college job. Does Taylor Swift make the cut here at the Takeout? Yes, but just barely. Taylor has a new album. You probably heard about that. And we will weave the economic, cultural, and political threads. The Takeout returns, I'm happy to say, in 90 seconds. Welcome back. In 90 seconds, we move over here to the conversation corner. President Trump has announced his pick to replace the former head of the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics after he fired the previous commissioner earlier this month in response to weaker than expected jobs report. His nominee is named E.J. Antoni, the chief economist and fellow at the Heritage Foundation, the conservative think tank behind Project 2025. Announcing his nomination on Truth Social, Trump wrote, quote, E.J. will ensure that the numbers released are honest and accurate. I want to bring in James Bennett. He is The Economist, my all-time favorite magazine, D.C. bureau chief. James, great to have you here. Thanks for joining me. Welcome to the conversation corner.
Wonderful to be with you. Thanks, Major.
Okay, the premise there the president leaves in the air is that the previous Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers were not truthful, not accurate. He even alleged they were politicized. There are legitimate questions to be raised about the methodology there, but saying they're politicized and can only be truthful and believed now because his guy is there creates a whole new dynamic.
Yeah, and even if his guy is there, one wonders. I mean, basically, the president is saying the numbers are only true if he says they're true, which already is, I think, undermining confidence and a core economic indicator for the U.S. I mean, you know, Major, billions of assets globally get repriced within moments of the release of Bureau of Labor Statistics data.
And those traders and investors know that they are subject to revisions.
Sure.
They've built that into their expectations, but they do care about what the government says the numbers are.
Yeah, and there was an unusually large revision in July of the previous month's data. There are reasons for that, as you said. And just 4 months ago, the president was boasting about a jobs report, the very same data, but in that case,
and the same methodology.
Exactly, same methodology, same commissioner in charge, but he was happier with the result then.
And it's also worth pointing out, and I know again, here's the word, methodology different. No one at the White House disputed anything about the BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, inflation numbers today because they liked them.
They liked them, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, although there are things to worry about in those numbers.
And E.J. Antoni has said in the past that, or recently rather, that maybe the monthly jobs reports should be suspended entirely.
Yeah, and there are private indicators that to some degree substitute for the BLS data, but nothing comes close. They're just, and it'd be very, very hard. The government has invested many decades and tremendous effort in building up the methodology and the history and the nonpartisan civil servants who produce this trustworthy data, and there's just nothing to substitute for it.
Help my audience get a sense of the risk involved of partisanizing government numbers.
I just think it erodes the foundation. In this case, it erodes the foundation of the entire global financial system. And unfortunately, it's part of a trend I know you've been worried about for years, and we both have, that we no longer live in a society where people operate with the same set of facts. And now you have the President of the United States basically saying nothing is true. And he did the same thing with DC crime statistics this week. But these numbers are so consequential because all our livelihoods to some degree depend upon them. And I'm so sorry. That shouldn't have happened.
That's a live phone call right here in the conversation corner. I love it. We are
From
so
my
informal
supposedly
here, James.
silenced phone.
Worry not, worry not. Other places you'd go, they'd frown at you and give you a dirty look. Not me. I love it. It's okay. It's life. Life happens on the show all the time. The Economist pays very close attention not only to the United States, it writes brilliantly, always has about the United States, but it takes a very broad global perspective. How do you sense from your reporters working at The Economist how foreign capitals are digesting not only this particular little dust-up about facts and numbers produced by the U.S. government with an economic orientation, but this long-running political pressure campaign against the chairman of the Federal Reserve?
I mean, again, it's tremendously concerning, I think, all over the world and destabilizing. And people they've trusted the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. They've regarded the Fed as the gold standard for monetary policy. And to see the president, and we've had presidents in the past complain about Federal Reserve chair, nothing new about that, going back LBJ, others unhappy, demanding they lower rates and so forth. But we've never seen a president attack a Fed chair quite so aggressively and make so clear that even if he leaves Jerome Powell in the job, that the next person he installs is going to be somebody who listens to Donald Trump. And I think that erosion of the independence of the Fed is terribly concerning. All in capitals all around the world.
Very quickly, James, do you think there is a coherency to the administration argument that the Fed has possibly missing data that would lead or should lead to a lower rate sooner?
I don't think there's any, again, I don't think there's a tradition of this. There's nothing wrong with the president making noise and criticizing the Fed, even making, for political reasons, trying to preempt possibly bad news by saying it's somebody else's fault. That's familiar. And it's possible the Fed is acting too slowly. We've certainly seen that in the past. Nobody's perfect, including, I would say, the President of the United States, who insists always that his version of the truth is the accurate one. So it's entirely possible, and as I say, that criticism is fair game. That's different than basically saying that the chair of the Federal Reserve should work for the President of the United States.
Economist James Bennett, I'm so glad you're here, and make sure you call back Treasury Secretary Bessent and tell him I said hello. I appreciate it.
I'll do that, Major.
Thanks so much. Next, the former executive director of the National Football League Players Association, DeMaurice Smith, has a new book out. And in that book, he holds nothing back on what's working with the NFL and what is not working with the NFL. That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Here is a look at what else we, and now you, are watching this evening. New details tonight on the gunfire at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention headquarters in Atlanta. That was on Friday. Investigators in Georgia now say the gunman in that incident fired close to 500 rounds using weapons belonging to his father. 30-year-old Patrick Joseph White killed one police officer before taking his own life. Police say he had expressed discontent over COVID-19 vaccines. Police revealed they had been called to his home a week earlier after he had verbalized threats of suicide. Haiti's most powerful gang leader has been indicted by D.C. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro. Jimmy Cherizier, who is widely known also as Barbecue, is facing conspiracy charges for allegedly violating U.S. sanctions tied to his role in gang violence. A Haiti-born naturalized U.S. citizen was also indicted for providing weapons and money to Cherizier. Cherizier threatened to overthrow the country's transitional government. Well, football fans, I know there's more than one or two of you out there. You are about to rejoice because, as you know, you've circled it on your calendar. The offseason almost over, 23 days. The Dallas Cowboys and Philadelphia Eagles will kick off a new NFL season. Well, just in time, a new book is giving an insider's account into the battles fought off the field between owners and players. Who's that insider? His name is DeMaurice Smith, and he spent 14 years as the executive director of the NFL Players Association. His new book, Turf Wars, The Fight for the Soul of America's Game. Here is some of our conversation. What's the good part of the NFL? What's the dark, persistent bad part of the NFL?
I think the great part of the NFL is its convening ability. You know, much like the town square that, you know, I really didn't grow up with one here, but, you know, you drive up into the upper Northeast, you know, in the town square, the public square, you know, between that and, you know, the way in which I could touch my high school football experience, whatever I felt playing with our teammates, the idea that Thanksgiving is around football, I think those are all great things. I think the most specious part of it is how the certain elements of the NFL are just manifestations of raw power. And it's raw power when you decide that Colin Kaepernick's not going to play anymore. And it's raw power when you decide, frankly, you know, another journalist, but I know somebody you know, when certain journalists started to speak out about concussions. Mm-hmm. And those, you know, a lot of those people were put on the back burner. You know, Bob Costas, I thought,
attempt to intimidate or silence.
And now you're
sideline, if you will.
And now you're seeing it now. I mean, this bullification of a power center that shuts down free speech, shuts down thought, shuts down just the idea that there's another way of perceiving or articulating things. I think that's the worst side of the NFL. And I saw it up close. On many occasions, I was the target of that. Right. But I also believed that, well, first of all, it's my job to stand up to this. And second, when we do stand up to it, you really do kind of pull away and reveal that maybe the emperor doesn't have the clothes that he or she thinks they have. And I think that's a great thing.
What is the Donald Trump effect on the NFL or vice versa?
Well, I think the effect on the NFL, we felt, 2017 forward, when he stands up and he calls players SOBs. I remember that vividly. Unfortunately, I'll never forget it. But, on a purely personal basis, I will never forget this instant understanding that for him and for the people around him, they thought it was yet another throwaway line of a crazy speech at a crazy time at another political rally that, frankly, is sometimes crazy. I remember distinctly thinking, this person has no idea that he has called a group of players mothers, the B word. Mm-hmm. And for some people, that is a throwaway line. For where I grew up, we would call it jonesing on each other, calling each other names, whatever. Man, once you cross the Rubicon of somebody's mother, that there's fisticuffs now.
It's a throwdown.
It's a throwdown. And I think his impact on the NFL was the way in which we saw the NFL respond to it. And literally, I don't know of another time in the NFL's history where there was such a unified belief of defiance
among the players
right. than that.
Right.
And for a union guy who's always looking for something to bring the players together.
Right, to lock arms.
I mean, I wish, there were dozens of times I wish they would do it on a picket line, but, you can dream.
Right.
But to have a group of people across the league respond to that in a way that I thought was not only positive, I thought it was direct, I thought it was timely, but most importantly, I thought that the players were thoughtful. And yes, some piped off in the media about X, Y, and Z. But what I loved the most was most everybody came back to a reverential moment and knelt.
Right. Let's unpack that for a moment, because you write about it extensively in the book. So Colin Kaepernick is the first person to do this.
Yeah.
It is to protest what he regards as a pattern, if not a system, of police brutality in our country. And then after police brutality occurs, a slap on the wrist or administrative interventions that simply do not render justice.
Right.
He begins to kneel. Other players begin to kneel. You even write in the book that Jerry Jones, at one time, owner of the Cowboys.
Well, he came together on that Monday night after
the shock
Trump.
of you and many others.
Yeah. I mean, I was shocked that Jerry made his way to the middle of the field, to be dead honest. But when I realized that his team was going to kneel, you knew Jerry was going to kneel. But to your point, that's a moment that was started by Cap. And again, a thoughtful moment of, this is what I see going on in the country, and this is how I'm going to react.
You can see my full conversation with DeMaurice Smith, which runs a fascinating 40 minutes on CBSNews.com, the Takeout page on YouTube, and all podcast platforms. Was President Trump's deployment of the National Guard in Los Angeles legal? Well, that's being argued right now in a California federal court. The latest on that next, right here at the Takeout. Welcome back. Lawyers for California and the federal government are facing off for a second straight day over President Trump's deployment of the National Guard in Los Angeles. Lawyers for Governor Gavin Newsom allege the president violated a 147-year-old law when he deployed the National Guard to quell protests over immigration raids and to defend ICE officers who are operating there. Joining me now, Republican strategist and CBS News political analyst Leslie Sanchez and Vedant Patel, who worked on the Biden 2020 campaign and later served as principal deputy spokesperson at the State Department. Great to have you both here. Leslie, this courtroom drama in California, to the degree it is dramatic, feeds into what's going on in the streets of the District of Columbia right now, okay? National Guard forces and the Marines sent to Los Angeles. I know plenty of people who live in Los Angeles who went down to see what was going on, said, yes, there were provocateurs, there were people who set things on fire, but it wasn't a city ablaze, it wasn't a city out of control. And to them, the deployment of the National Guard and the Marines felt not only like overkill, but something bordering on performative overkill. And now we're going to try to find out if there was a legal basis for it in the first place.
I think what's interesting is even the California argument is that the Guard was there doing perimeter and courthouse protection. It was something that was fast. It was something that was needed. It was more of a tourniquet instead of a takeover. And I think that's really going to be where the politics lie, right? You have the optics of it, and you saw the fires. But people, if you ask them in those surveys, do they feel that the city was safer? They would argue that they do. And I think that's where it's going to fall out. You have one legal aspect, but one the optic aspect. And I think people felt it was a fair response.
Vedant?
I think this is really ultimately a little bit of a process thing at the end of the day. It's unprecedented to have the National Guard come in without the governor's cooperation, without the governor's asking. I've worked in a White House before. When there are crises, when there's national disasters, when there's that extra needed of that federal oomph, you're supposed to be working with governors to offer that support, not just do this unilaterally. And I think that is the troubling thing. But at the crux of it, I think there are going to be people both in California, across the country, and including in the district that say, we want to see this kind of support when it comes to our local law enforcement. And so that's going to be the needle that's going to be needed to thread.
I want to ask you about something that Zohran Mamdani has done. Not only is he on a tour of the 5 boroughs talking about an anti-Trump tour, but also linking it to Andrew Cuomo. Let's listen to that.
And we stand here speaking about Donald Trump and have to acknowledge the similarities between two of these leaders. And it makes sense because this is a former governor who is getting advice from the current president.
Now, I don't find it fascinating that Zoran Mamdani is attacking Andrew Cuomo. I just am interested in the vociferousness of it because it has recently intensified. And that tells me that there's something that they're seeing in the data that's probably troubling.
So look, I've not seen that polling data, whatever data.
Right now, the most recent public poll has him up 19.
Right. I mean, whatever internal memo that the Mamdani campaign might be seeing that they think this is a good strategy. I'm of the point of view that the reason he was so potent in the primary was because of having this economic message, talking about affordability, talking about issues that a lot of New Yorkers could resonate with: public transit, groceries, rent. I think the best that he can do is stay that close to that message and keep that his home base. I'm sure this Trump message is gonna maybe expand his electorate a little bit, but the proof is in the pudding that people really latched onto his economic agenda, and that's where I think they should be keeping their focus.
Leslie, analyze the Trump of it all up in New York City.
Well, I mean, at the Trump of it all, people want safe streets, they want a better economy, they want a strong New York. But they don't want socialism or communism in terms of their leadership. And I think the more that's put out there, it's a bigger thing. But the question is he really just auditioning to be the national voice of the resistance, of the opposition? Because that's more what it sounds like, as opposed to somebody who's focused on
meaning believing he's going to win.
Yeah.
And with that victory become something larger.
Yeah.
Even though mayor of New York is pretty large all by itself.
It's pretty large in itself, but if you saw like conservative George Will came on and said, about every generation you need something extreme like this to kind of balance the scales and people see how ridiculous
is Zoran Mamdani the generational voice and face of the new Democratic Party?
I think he's a potent candidate running for mayor of New York.
Right. And that's all. Full stop. Full stop. You're like Democrat, full stop.
Each electorate, there's a lot of campaigns happening in 25 and 26, and each electorate is going to be apples to oranges. I don't think there's a single campaign happening that you can brush with the broad stroke. He's running a great race that's focused on New York. I think he should keep doing that. New York's one of the most expensive cities on the planet. He should keep talking about those issues. Is he going to become some standard bearer for the Democratic Party? I don't necessarily think so. I think he's an energetic candidate that's done a lot to resonate with people because he's kept the issues local. And I think he's a great candidate for New York. Is that going to resonate elsewhere? Who knows, local, right?
Like defund the police to now he's trying to pivot and say that he's supporting the police. I mean, I don't think you can have it both ways. New Yorkers, any voters, more sophisticated than that. And if he becomes the standard bearer of the Democratic Party, I think that is where the Democrats are really are they going to fall in line or fall out of love? And that's what Republicans are waiting to see.
I do just want to say, I think that there's been a lot of, emphasis focused on, is he going to be the standard bearer or not? I do think that Democrats around the country, they could take a couple of lessons, particularly in talking about these affordability issues. Big cities are where you go and you try out these crazy creative ideas like rent freezes and grocery stores. I'm not saying they all are going to necessarily work.
Or that they're all crazy. But they may seem crazy. Trump says they're crazy. You're not necessarily accepting that premise.
But these are things that people, I think, really resonate with. And, okay, these are some creative ideas. This is someone who's trying to be responsive to my needs. And I think any Democrat running around the country could take a lesson from that playbook.
That'll have to be the last word. Vedant Patel, Leslie Sanchez, I appreciate you being here very much. Thanks for joining me at the family table. Entry-level jobs are disappearing, and artificial intelligence might be partly to blame. That's not good news. How recent grads are feeling all this and reacting. Next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back. Artificial intelligence is one of the top 5 reasons behind job losses this year. That's according to career transition service firm Challenger, Gray & Christmas. And a new article in the Wall Street Journal that caught my eye details how young, educated Americans are struggling to break into the workforce and are some of the earliest victims of this technological revolution. Its co-author Lindsay Ellis joins me here now. Lindsay, it's great to have you in the Conversation Corner. Yeah. Thanks so much. I want to tie 2 things together here because there is an artificial intelligence story that is driving stock market gains, higher productivity. It is possibly insulating a lot of big companies from tariffs, at least so far. That's the high side of this story. But you and others at the Wall Street Journal detected a hard job market, a surprisingly hard job market for college grads. Walk us through that.
Yeah, and what's especially fascinating is that some of the industries where productivity has increased the most are seeing the softest demand for new graduates, connecting those 2 issues. demand has fallen, we've found, in a variety of sectors. Yes, tech, but also marketing roles, traditional business back-end roles. Chief executives have told us in each of those cases, or recruiters or investors, that new graduate work can be pretty easily offloaded to artificial intelligence, and that they're making decisions about whether to hire someone new or replace someone who left, and in many cases are leaning on that technology instead of extending an offer.
I have heard that if you are someone in the communication space, marketing, things like that, it's very fraught out there. You mentioned the article, information, finance, insurance, technical services. And let's just break it down, folks, on the graphic level. Bachelor's degree or higher, 2.7% unemployment rate. Overall unemployment rate, 4.2%. So this is filtering through those who are looking for new jobs.
Yes, and so for young professionals with a bachelor's degree, in that 22 to 27 age range, the Burning Glass Institute really dug into their unemployment rate and found that, the cohort who had a bachelor's, who were in that 20-something group, their unemployment rate had risen the fastest over the last few years, faster than people with associate's degrees, faster than people with just a high school diploma. So it's these individuals who have college degrees, maybe haven't found a job that requires one, their unemployment rate is getting worse.
And so if you're knocking on this door and it simply does not open, and you're a college graduate, what are your options?
It's a great question. So the young professionals who I'm talking to, the people who hire them, the advice that keeps bubbling up in these conversations is to focus on the types of positions that really value person-to-person connection. One young woman who I talked to a couple months ago, she was laid off from a position, a back-end, HR payroll job, and now in her new role, she's in her new job search, she's looking for a position that she thinks would be less susceptible for automation, something that requires either a strategic bend or kind of face-to-face in-person communication, client-facing roles, to try and be less exposed to the technology.
But there's a numbers game here. There simply aren't that large a volume of those kind of interactive face-to-face jobs as compared to the back-end support ones that are being moved out, if not erased entirely, by artificial intelligence.
Absolutely, and even in the last few years, the Burning Glass Institute was looking at the share of college graduates who wind up in jobs that don't require a degree. So that term is called underemployment, and that is increasing and very much so since the pandemic, especially. So many college grads are landing in these positions that don't make use of the diploma that they've spent a lot of money on.
They're overqualified and underemployed, essentially.
Absolutely, yes. And you try and think about the numbers game of how do you land one of these jobs that will earn you enough money to maybe pay back some of that debt or get you on your feet as you start your professional life, and wouldn't be exposed to automation. I think that's a key concern for a lot of young professionals I interview.
Very quickly, if there's any insights you could have for those who are watching, who are about to go into college, or parents with college-age kids who haven't gone across this Rubicon, how should they think about college?
Yeah, I think when I talk to career coaches at schools, many colleges have a career center, and they basically say, start thinking about what comes after graduation well sooner than you would expect. Your freshman year, start thinking about internships, start applying for things, networking well earlier than you expect to make those connections and hopefully land on your feet.
And look out for those industries I just mentioned. Lindsay Ellis, the Wall Street Journal. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Much.
Yeah.
Look what you made her do. You can catch on to that, folks. I know you can. After pulling off the highest grossing tour in history, Taylor Swift announces her 12th studio album. More on that. I know you love it. Right here on The Takeout. In case you didn't already know, Taylor Swift can also do it with a mended heart, announcing her new studio album with boyfriend and NFL star Travis Kelce at her side.
This is my brand new album, The Life of a Showgirl.
TS12! Yeah. In true Swift fashion, this clip teasing her 12th studio album was posted at 12:12 a.m., August 12th. A lot of 12s there. The full episode of her appearance on the Kelsey Brothers New Heights podcast, nearly as popular as The Takeout, I'm just kidding, will be released tomorrow. Joining me now, Rolling Stone senior writer Brittany Spanos. Brittany, it's great to have you with us. Taylor Swift is not just a pop star. She's a cultural force. She's an economic force. She also, whether she likes to or not, dabbles in politics. How should we regard this new album in all of those spaces, cultural, economic, political?
Yeah, I mean, this title and sort of the ideas that kind of come with it seems like it will probably deal a lot with her fame and deal a lot with the very mega superstar status that the Eras Tour sort of brought to her, that made her more famous than anyone in the world right now. It's the biggest tour of all time. And she kind of plays with this concept of being a showgirl, of being someone who is kind of finding herself having to portray the sort of glittery element of her pop stardom while dealing with her very human life and reality and emotions and kind of the dichotomy of those two things. So this seems like an album that might dive into that a little bit more.
Brittany, I, in full disclosure mode, not a Swiftie. I'm aware, but not a Swiftie. Is there any risk of overexposure? I've heard from some Swifties in the audience that they're like, in my office, are like, whoa, I'm not quite ready.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that kind of creeps up, especially with women in any industry, but Taylor has dealt with this in her career before, after 1989, for example, that was sort of the first really kind of explosive moment in her, I mean, not first, but kind of the most explosive kind of moment in her career that sort of put her into a new stratosphere outside of country music into pop music. And there was a big overexposure backlash that happened that led to the album Reputation. So, I think we're kind of seeing it a little bit now where, she went on this big 2-year tour. She's released all these albums in the last 5 years, re-recorded albums, new material. It's been so much. So, yeah, of course, the overexposure is very real and occurring in this moment.
Taylor Swift is a phenomenon, and I want to go through some data points to underscore that. I want to rattle off just a few. Control room, I'm taking this in order, so roll the graphics. Most weeks at #1 on the Billboard 200 for a solo artist, 86. Most #1 hits on Billboard's U.S. Digital Songs chart, 29. Most streamed artist on Spotify, more than 106 billion streams. Most Grammy Award wins for Album of the Year, 4. And of course, the highest grossing concert tour of all time, the Eras Tour, grossed more than $2 billion. There was talk during that Eras Tour of the Swiftian economy that would crop up in cities where she was going and touring. President Trump has gotten into this lately, saying she's less popular because she endorsed Kamala Harris. Is there a political thread worth tugging on here, Brittany?
I mean, a little bit, of course, because obviously Trump does talk about her quite a bit, especially even in the last several months of her not really doing a lot career-wise. I mean, she just got off a 2-year tour and hadn't yet announced this new album. So, it's sort of been a flashpoint for him to bring up the idea that she fell off because she endorsed Kamala. But, this is very clear that that's not true with this album and with this announcement even. But, it's interesting to see what will happen in the future with her talking about politics. She has sort of gone in and out of talking about it. It was a big deal for her to endorse anyone in the last election. So Brittany, I'm curious how that will factor in the future.
And we are as well. Brittany Spanos, Rolling Stone, I appreciate your time. Thanks so very much. That's it for today with The Takeout. Please stick around. The Daily Report starts right now.